Welcome everyone and good morning. Glad you can make it today. Presenter today is Scott Ladin. He'll be doing the webinar on how to start a small business. He is a certified SCORE mentor with our Greater Rochester chapter of SCORE here and also in Arizona. So he goes back and forth depending on what weather he's up for. He's a certified SCORE mentor and global marketing and business development professional with over 35 years experience across all aspects of business, from project and product management, marketing, communications, and business development. So I would like to pass this on to Scott, where he can take over from here and enjoy the show.
Hey, thanks, Kristen. Much appreciated. And welcome, everybody. You know, I can only think of two reasons why folks might be joining us this morning in the middle of a week. The first is you're either bored or have run out of the Netflix and Hulu movies and episodes to watch, or you're actually thinking about starting a small business and looking for some insights into that. So hopefully it's the latter, because I guarantee you I won't be providing much entertainment along the lines of the former. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about SCORE, give you some background. SCORE was established back in 1964, and we are a resource partner with the Small Business Administration. The SBA provides funding support to small businesses, and SCORE provides mentoring and business guidance to small businesses. We're one of 300 chapters throughout the country, and in Rochester here we have roughly about 70 or so different mentors, and we have experience and expertise across just a multitude of disciplines from a business perspective. So don't hesitate to reach out to SCORE, you know, depending upon the kinds of information you may need. You know, and as Kristen mentioned, we also have a variety of different workshops across different dimensions and disciplines of business. So, you know, check out the website link that I've listed below because new workshops are popping up every month. And we hope to give you the opportunity to take advantage of those. At the end of our presentation today, I'll be sending out a couple of things to you. One is a copy of the presentation in a PDF format, as well as a copy of this booklet. It's called The Simple Steps for Starting Your Business. It's a wonderful booklet. I use it with almost every new client and even some clients that have already been in business, because it's a soup to nuts at a fairly high level description of all of the different disciplines that you would need to become familiar with as you're starting a business. So don't worry about trying to take notes on every single page. The deck has been designed as a reference source that once you have the PDF, you can go back through it and you know, look for particular pieces of information. And we'll also be sending you a link to the recorded webinar once that's available, along with a survey. We always benefit from customers and clients' comments so that we can learn to do things better and more effectively and better meet the needs of our clients. So with that said, let me give you some idea of the different areas that we're going to be covering today. And I'm thinking with the Q&A today, we'll probably be running between an hour and a half to 2 hours. Don't hesitate to put a question into either the Q&A box or the chat box as we go through. I will pause periodically to enable you to kind of process some of the information and put a question into the queue so that we can address it. The more questions we have, the more effective and the beneficial it will be to everyone. So really, I encourage you to put some questions in to the audience or to the chat and Q&A boxes. Just a disclaimer here. I want to let you know that I am neither an attorney nor an accountant. And so some of your questions may be technical enough that I won't be able to answer them and would refer you to those professionals. If any of you are professional in any of those areas, you know, please don't hesitate to jump in and offer your insights to it. So that said, we're going to start out with a basic question, which is owning a business the right thing for you? We'll talk about some of the different options for getting started in a business. We'll talk about the legal aspects, legal dimensions to starting a business. We'll talk about business planning, a couple of different thoughts and some approaches to doing that. We'll go over some financials and funding. One of the things you may, hear me say periodically today is, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. And I found that to be true in so many cases. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about marketing and how to market your business effectively and drive some of the top line revenues and sales that we all need to succeed. So that said, let's rock and roll and get on to the first part of it. So the question is owning a business the right thing for you to do? Well, there's a lot of myths and there's some realities that we all have to consider. I bring to this my experience, actually the experience through my wife, who owned a local stationery and gift shop for 30 years. So I lived every day of that along with her. So one of the questions that entrepreneurs need to ask themselves or often consider is, that you won't need to work too hard or put in such long hours. Well, let me dissuade you of thinking that because owning a business is a lifestyle in and of itself. And again, from my experience, you will eat, sleep, and breathe your business. You'll think about it during your waking hours and many of your non-waking hours. Your product or service is unique and there's no competition. Well, good luck with that. There's always competition. There's direct competition, there's indirect competition. You may start out with a window of opportunity where there's nothing comparable in many ways to what you're offering, but at the end of the day, somebody's going to find a way to compete. And so your job is to know your competition as well as or better than yourself. So there's always competition. If I own a business, I won't have to pay Social Security taxes. No, not going to happen. There's a self-employment tax, which is 15.3 to 3%. The rate consists of two parts, which are 12.4% for Social Security, and then 2.9% for Medicare. And all of those are, taxed and paid for on your income tax payment. So no luck there. You're still going to have to pay Social Security taxes. As a business owner, I can expense everything. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend trying that. Certainly, all of the basic expenses necessary to run a business can be deducted through your net income analysis. Things like rent and salaries, equipment and supplies, telephone, internet, and so forth, they are. Portions of your home may be, if you're a home-based. Some of your automobile expenses may be as well, but not everything. And so I always encourage my entrepreneurs, my clients, to work with their accountants to know what they can and cannot deduct appropriately. You get to do what you want to do. Yeah, that's great. And by the way, I got a bridge here that I can sell you as well. As I mentioned, owning a business is a 24/7 lifestyle. So think about the time you may or may not have to take a vacation. My dad ran a television repair and burglar alarm installation business for almost 30 years. And I'll be honest with you, he was in a partnership and there was a lot of discussion about who does what and who doesn't do what. So you have obligations across the board. Things like work-life balance are things you need to consider. Cash flow is an issue, right? If your business is running short on cash, who are you going to pay first? Your contractors, your employees, or yourself? What about childcare? How are you going to deal with that? We had two little kids when my wife was running her business, and they often spent time in the playpen in the retail store. Good and the bad. The customers loved it, and they enjoyed playing with the kids a little bit, but nonetheless, it was a challenge. So no, you don't get to do what you want to do, and you really have to make some choices along the way. So most businesses start with an idea, perhaps a novel idea. The bottom line here is that you need to find out and really understand who is going to buy from you and why they're going to buy your product and why they're going to buy that product or service from you. I often tell my clients to put themselves in the mind of their potential customers. and think about what keeps those customers up at night. What challenges do they face daily? What is it that you're going to do to address those challenges, to meet their needs, meet their wants? And why are they going to ask you to address those needs and wants and solve their problems versus somebody else who can offer something similar? I often say again to my clients, what is it that you do better, cheaper, or faster that enables your customer to do what they do better, cheaper, or faster? And so the conversation that we're going to have today and some of the other workshops that we offer kind of help you to focus down on exactly those things, the customer and then what we call the value propositions, the things that help you to solve their problems and meet their needs and wants. So, this is a big deal, right? Getting into business. And although you may have a good idea, there are some significant skill sets that you need to have in order to succeed over the long term. And no one I know gets into business for a short term unless you're a stock trader and you can strike it rich early. You're in business because you want to build a career. You want to build something that's meaningful and valuable to you and your family. And so some of these are both professional and personal attributes. I encourage you to be as self-aware as possible and ask yourself these hard questions. Really dive into it. Look inside yourself. Because as a business owner and a business leader, you're going to set an example for your employees. And you're going to create that perception and that tone among your customer and your market that reflects who you are and reflects your brand equity. Your brand is more than just your logo and your tagline. Your brand is all about the perception people have, your customers have of your business. And so you're going to set that tone. I recently had a client who came to me and said, I want to start a restaurant. And I said, great, wonderful idea. I said, how long have you worked in the business? Well, I haven't. Oh, okay. Well, tell me about your educational background. Do you have a degree of any kind in food service or hospitality? No, never did any of that. And so I looked at my client and I said, well, why is it that you want to be in the business? Why do you want to start a restaurant? Well, I like to cook. I like to make people happy. And I think my food is good. And it's all well and good. It's all great stuff. But at the end of the day, it isn't going to make for a successful business. And so my advice to that client right then and there was go out and work in that industry and hospitality and food service for a year, maybe 2 or 3, and then come back and revisit your thinking and see if being in the restaurant business is something you really want to do and can succeed. So there's a lot of introspection in here that needs to happen. And the bottom line is, can you take your passion and your values, give life to them, and generate something that provides you with a long-term success? So a lot of food for thought. So having put that in place at the beginning, let me move us on to thinking about some of the options that you have to starting a new business. So one way to do that is to just do that, start a brand new business. The benefits on that side of that coin are that you're not hampered by a previous image or equipment or an existing business. On the other side of that, you do have to build it from the beginning, your brand, your recognition, and your customer base. You can choose your own name, your own logo, and build your business relationships by yourself. And you can explore new markets and new directions. Again, the other side of that coin is you're taking a big risk because you don't have a history of success. You don't know what's worked and hasn't worked in the past. And so there's a lot of don't know what you don't know in starting up a brand new business. And because there's no history or track record, it may be harder to find funding to get that business off the ground. Another option is to buy an existing business. And so some of the benefits of that include gaining an established customer base, an existing location or supplier relationships. The business is a known entity and may have a proven formula with name and brand recognition. You can and you should review the business's records before buying it to make sure that it's profitable. And because the business has a track record and a relationship, for example, with a bank, it may be easier to obtain financing and funding as you go along the way. On the other side of that coin, there may be some problems that didn't surface in the initial analysis, the due diligence. And you may find that there were perhaps some misrepresentations of different parts of the business. Does the business have a good reputation? Is it something that you may have to repair going forward? What about the business's inventory? Is it obsolete? Is it usable? Is it broken or irreparable? Some of the assets or goodwill could be inflated. This is why, again, when you do your due diligence, you want to have a good CPA review all of the financial statements. Employees or customers may be loyal to the former owner, and that may cause you some headaches, either internally or externally. And so you're new to this business. There's no guarantee past success will continue under your ownership. Just a little bit of background on starting a business. 75% of new businesses are going to fail within the first 2 years. 90% fail within 5 years, and 95% fail within 10 years. And the biggest reason they fail is generally because of lack of capital or funding. They run out of money. They don't generate enough top-line sales to support the operating expenses of the business. Other reasons are retaining an inadequate management team or having a faulty infrastructure or business model. Your marketing initiatives may be too costly and ineffective, and in most cases, that results from inappropriate targeting and message development. But all of these things are things that you need to consider if you're looking at either starting up or buying a new business. One of the things you can also do is consider buying into a franchise, right? As a franchisee, you become part of a system that's well known and typically has a proven history. You've got the marketing and sales power and expertise of the franchisor behind you. And you get training and guidance from the franchisor. You're part of a network of other franchise operators, and you can reach out to them for help and guidance. And because it is an established business, it may be easier to finance. And many of the franchisors have relationships with lenders whom you can reach out to. The other side of that coin is that you don't have as much freedom as an independent business owner. You're not free to choose your marketing. You're not free to choose your suppliers. You have to pay royalties and other fees to the franchisor. That's how they make their money. There's going to be a binding contract that limits your ability to exit the business, as well as other obligations. I don't recall off the top of my head the name of that particular document, but it's a franchise disclosure document that's typically a lot of pages long, and I'm talking 50 to 100 pages. You want to have that reviewed very carefully by your attorney and by your accountant before you sign on the dotted line. Things it may do is restrict you to a geographic territory. It may enable you to only open up or have access to other franchises in geographic areas as well. And if the franchisor has any problems, financial, image, or otherwise, they are going to become your problem. It's, as they say, what rolls downhill, and you'll be on the receiving end of that. If you're thinking of starting a franchise, buying into a franchise, look into something called frannet.com. It's an organization that provides education and support to potential franchisees. It can be, a very valuable resource and partner in the process. In Rochester, we're very fortunate to have someone who's been involved with Frannet for many, many years, is an expert in that area. And if a franchise is something you're thinking about, follow up to my email with your email, and I will reach out to that individual and help to facilitate some contact between you guys. Buying a franchise is certainly a very viable option. So 3 different ways to approach getting into business: starting something new, buying something in existence, or acquiring a franchise operation. Putting all of that together, and I'm referring back to the slide, a few slides earlier about the attributes and the disciplines, you really need to look into what are the skills that you have personally in terms of managing and operating your business. You need to have these capabilities, you need to have these skill sets, and having them will help to ensure the long-term success and viability of your business. I talk with clients who have expertise in particular areas, like right now there's a number of folks that are out there trying to offer cybersecurity or IT related business and consulting services, which is great. They're experts in those areas. But what they're not particularly expert in is sales and marketing. They're not accountants and bookkeepers. They don't know how to manage necessarily a computer system or a network environment. So there may be a variety of skill sets that particular discipline doesn't have. If you're a restaurateur, you're going to have to deal with hiring and firing of employees fairly regularly. So bottom line is, among the personal attributes that I mentioned earlier, there are some professional attributes and skill sets you need. Now, if you don't have these skill sets and they are necessary to your business, what do? Well, you have two options. You can hire them. You can hire, a human resources manager. You can hire a marketing manager for your business, or you can contract out to people who do these things on a for-hire basis. But either way, you're going to have to buy and pay for these services. And again, going back to that slide about the myths, as a business leader, as a business owner, you can't just throw the requirements over the fence and expect somebody else to do them. You're going to have to take charge, take control. You're going to have to audit and review all of the activities of anybody who's doing anything for your business. And so what you're going to find is that you're going to have to make some judgments about how much time you spend working in your business versus working on your business. And a rule of thumb that we often say to people is that you really only have 70% of your time to work on your product or service, and the other 30% of your time is spent managing your business. And so, if you look at your 40 hours a week, you've roughly got about 20, 25, 30 hours to do your work. And then the other time is going to be spent managing the business to make sure that it stays healthy throughout the period of time. So food for thought, right? So you want to look at your personal attributes as well as your skill sets. Partnering is really key, and having the right resources and partners to help you succeed is essential. It just means you're going to have a good foundation underfoot to do what you need to do. And so we recommend that every small business have the following partners. First of all, you want to be in a relationship with a banker. They're going to help you with potentially any business planning or financing. They're going to help you set up your appropriate checking and or savings and or retirement accounts potentially. I found with the recent COVID scenarios, the funding support, that those businesses that had a good relationship with the bankers, because the PPP loans were done through the banks, those that had good relationships were more likely to get the benefit of the PPP loans. So, I encourage you to, when you go to the bank to make your deposits or make your withdrawals, not just go through the ATM, but actually go into the bank, talk with the tellers, talk with the loan officers, and let people get to know who you are on a personal basis. We also recommend that you have an accountant. Why do you want to have an accountant? Because you're going to have some kind of an accounting system, preferably a software-based solution. And you're going to want to have that set up properly. So you're going to want to work with your accountant and your bookkeeper to make sure that your chart of accounts is set up correctly so that you can track your cash flows. I have a client right now who's been in business for 6 years, and we sat down to try to do a cash flow analysis and found that her allocation of expenses was mismatched. Inventories were in the wrong place. And so we struggled and are still continuing to work on developing a historical cash flow so that we can do some pro forma projections for her business going forward. So definitely want to have an accountant in your life. Insurance agents are critical as well. You probably have an insurance agent to cover your home or your apartment, but business insurance is key as well, because sure as shooting, you know what's going to hit the fan at some point. We have a litigious society, and you want to be sure that you have appropriate insurance coverage for accidents that may happen, delays that may happen in producing your product or service that may cost your client money, things like that. So you want to be sure that you have an insurance policy that is focused on your business. The last one I mentioned several times is having a lawyer. Again, stuff happens. You want to protect yourself where you can. If you're providing services, I mentioned, such as an IT service, you're going to develop a contract with your client. And you want that contract to be reviewed and prepared by your lawyer for a variety of reasons. And so a lawyer is someone that needs to be in your business. So all of these professionals need to be accounted for in your cash flow and your net income analyses, because you will have bank fees. You will probably pay your accountant on a quarterly basis to make sure your quarterlies are paid properly. You're going to pay insurance premiums maybe once, twice a year. And you may have some legal interactions as well periodically, depending upon how your business flows. And the other partner I highly encourage you to consider is your SCORE business mentor, right? Because we can help you get your thoughts wrapped around some of these particular professional needs, as well as many of the other things we've talked about before and the things we're going to talk about going forward. So don't hesitate to reach out, because we are here for you, and our services are provided at no charge. All right. So let me pause for a moment. I've been talking a lot. I'm going to give you guys a moment to process before we go on to the next thing and see if there's any questions or comments.
Nothing in the queue just yet.
Okay. All right. Jump in, folks, if you do have a question or a comment. I'm glad to handle any of the thoughts that you might have. All right. So let's go on and talk about some legal things that you may want to consider as you go forward with setting up your business. And this is the high level, just the brush strokes that you want to have in front of you. The easiest way to form a business is to set up what we call a DBA. It stands for doing business as. And it's a very simple thing to do. It protects the business's name from use by any others in the county where it's filed. And it's filed in the county. So you'll go to Monroe County, and you'll file a DBA. You'll put in the name that you want to use, and it'll cost you $33. You don't need to necessarily use that DBA for your marketing. You can use any name for marketing, but should you choose to use it, it is protected from anybody else. The other thing you'll want to have as a basic starting point for your business is called an employer identification number, an EIN. You'll need it to open up a bank account. You may need it to get business licenses and file taxes. And it's issued by the IRS, and it is for free. Some states, depending upon what state you'll be doing business in, may issue also a sales tax ID number, which gives your business permission to charge sales tax. Some states use the EIN, the federal number, which I believe New York does. But some states may issue a separate number from the EIN. Again, you want to check with your accountant in the locale that you're doing, in which you're doing business, and understand what it is that's right for you. So that said, that's kind of the first steps in getting things set up. From there, you want to begin to think about your legal business structure, business and tax structure. And for small businesses, there are generally just three structures that you'll think about. The sole proprietorship or partnership, where the one person or the partners own the business. The earnings are taxed just once, and the owners are personally liable for any issues that may occur in the business. So a customer might sue you directly And so whatever you have your own, have or own your assets could potentially be at risk in a sole proprietorship. The limited liability company, on the other hand, provides a separation of assets and cash flow from the owners and the business. Earnings and losses are still passed through from a tax perspective, but there is a separation, and it's important to separate your funds and your checking accounts from your personal assets. And there should be some sort of a written membership agreement if there are multiple members of the LLC. And if you're a professional, there's also, I believe it's called an LLCP or an LLP for folks who are doctors and other healthcare practitioners. An S Corp, a subchapter corp, again, limits the liability of the business owner. Earnings and losses, again, are still personally taxed. It all passes through. That said, there are some regulations that can be costly and time consuming, and there may be some possible restrictions to the way in which you raise your capital. I know that Arizona, as a state, has some very, very restrictive covenants about how you raise money and when you can raise money and who can participate in the fundraising. So my disclaimer here at the bottom is always, when you're thinking about setting up your business, the legal and tax structure, sit down with your attorney, sit down with your accountant, and have them work with you and help them understand how your business is going to operate, and help them to, and they can help you then set up the appropriate legal business structure for the business. Okay, moving along. You want to protect your company name and prospective trademarks. So there are three things you need to consider as you go through this, right? You want to look at searching out the availability of the name, and here's a couple of different sources that you can reach out to. If you're setting up a website, you can reach out to this particular web link and check out the availability of the name that you would like to use. And then trademarks. So the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office is available for a lot of these searches. The librarians, particularly the Central Library here in Rochester, can help you with some of this activity. They're really good at what they do. It's very important that you do this research up front, because it can be extremely costly if you make an error and find out that the names or logos or whatever you've chosen to represent your brand are used by someone else. I'll tell you a story. There was an article recently in Fortune magazine about a company called Panda Libre out in Arizona. Panda Libre provides an Asian Mexican fusion fast food service. They are being sued by Panda Express, who you may recall provides a Chinese fast food business. The suit claims infringement and confusion in the marketplace. Now, I don't know where the suit has landed recently, whether it's closed or not, but should Panda Libre have to lose the case, they are going to have to rebrand, which means new logos, new facility design, new artwork, new uniforms, and so on and so forth. So it can be really expensive if you don't get it right and don't understand the availability of the trademarks and so on that you choose to use. Touching briefly on intellectual property, things like your online or web content, digital art, and so on. You also want to protect all of those, right, using copyrights and so on. And again, you may want to work with a copyright or an intellectual property attorney to make sure that you are adequately protected. For example, if you're building a website, you want to make sure, or if you hire someone, I should say, to build a website, you want to be sure that in that contract, it stipulates that you are the owner of the content and you have the rights to the files that ultimately result from the work product of the web developer. because things happen, and down the road, a year, 2 years, 5 years, you may choose to move your files from that web developer's host facilities, and you want to know that you have the rights and the access to all of that content. So you want to pay attention to those sorts of things. If you have an invention or some other quote unquote secret sauce, you may want to consider filing for patents. If you watch Shark Tank, you'll often hear them talk about what patents have been applied for, design and or utility type patents. Because again, that protects your right, gives you a window of opportunity within which to take advantage of your idea or your secret sauce. So definitely want to do this research up front and be sure that you're free and clear to use whatever it is that you intend to use to develop your brand and your business recognition. Before we jump into the hiring and so forth of employees and whatnot, I just thought I'd pause for one more minute to see if there are any questions about anything that I just talked about, because there's a lot there. All right, I promised you I wasn't going to be as entertaining as Netflix, and it looks like I'm meeting meeting your expectations accordingly.
Yeah, there's no questions. I did put in the chat, Scott. I don't know if you were aware, but the Rochester Public Library in the Business Insight Center has a division called the Carlson Center for Intellectual Property.
Oh, good.
They meet by appointment only, and they can help with the research and application for patents, trademarks, and copyrights.
And you called that the Carlson Center for
Intellectual property.
For IP. Okay, excellent. I'm just making a note on my
Yep, and I put all the information in the chat for anybody who might want it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, probably a great resource down there. Okay, let's talk about employees, right? This is non-trivial to be sure, right? If your business requires you to hire employees or contractors, and this is not your area of expertise, you might consider working with an HR or a payroll processing professional organization, and I've mentioned a couple here. They'll provide the expertise that you need and help to make sure that you're in compliance with all of the necessary federal, state, and perhaps municipal guidelines for hiring, training, and retaining employees. Excuse me. Don't underestimate the importance of getting your HR needs right at the beginning and the time and resources it's going to take, because you're going to need to have, in many instances, documented policies, procedures, and so on. And these are going to need to be consistent across your business in different ways. So if this is not your area of expertise, again, I encourage you to reach out to those who do have the expertise in these areas. SCORE mentors do have some expertise, and while we don't provide consultation, we can certainly provide mentoring and guidance as to what you need to approach this from the perspective of your own business. Worker classification is something that's been in the news quite a bit. In particular, the ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft. I think there's a number of lawsuits pending across different states against Uber for quote-unquote misclassifying contractors or employees as contractors versus direct employees. Worker classification is key, and it affects income taxes, Social Security taxes, and Medicare taxes. And it affects how you file your tax returns, eligibility for Social Security and Medicare, and employer-provided benefits and tax responsibilities. This is a copy of an IRS brochure that is available at SCORE. You can also find it on the irs.gov website. So, as you plan your business, you're going to need to understand how you're going to classify your employees as contractors or as direct, and then what documents you're going to use to deal with the taxation, whether it's a W-2 to an employee or a 1099 to a contractor. Again, the disclaimer, talk with your accountant, talk with your attorney. Make sure you're doing things right, because it can be very expensive to undo things that you might do in these areas. All right, well, we talked a little bit about insurance. I mentioned that you need to have a relationship with an insurance agent or insurance broker. I'm not going to hit all of these individually, but as you can see, depending upon the business that you're in, where you're doing your business, there are just a variety of different kinds of insurance coverages that you might consider. And so these are a few of them listed here. If you don't have the right insurance, all of your hard work and good intentions could be lost in the blink of an eye, either through physical damage or through some sort of legal damage. So you want to be careful. You want to make sure that you're covered. You want to make sure that your assets are adequately protected, for example, through an LLC type of structure. So again, you'll get a copy of the PDF, so don't worry about making all kinds of notes here. But these are food for thought. And as you're starting to set up your business, consider the costs of setting these up and working with an insurance agent to get those coverages in place. Okay, so let me pause here for a moment before we go on to the next segment of our presentation. See if there's any questions.
None so far.
All right, must be fulfilling all of your wishes and dreams here. All right, now we'll get on to simple business planning. I call it simple, but that's really kind of a misnomer. It's the tool that looks simple. It's not the process. I'm a big fan of this thing called a business model canvas. It's a tool that you can use at the outset instead of a rigorous and traditional business plan. You know, it kind of helps you discover how your business is going to operate on a day-to-day basis. And I've broken it up here into three major areas, right? The purple is the ways in which you're going to create value. And this is the stuff that happens outside your business, helping you to focus on your customer. You know, what is it that you do? Who do you help? How do you connect with them? And how do you interact with them? So this is where you're creating the value. The two most important boxes in all of this are boxes number 1 and number 2. Because they are going to provide you with a foundational understanding of how you're going to go to market, your messaging, and to whom you're talking. And they're also going to provide the foundation for the other 2 segment areas, which is in the yellow, for example, how you're going to deliver the value that you're committed or committing to for that client customer set. So how is it that you do what you do? You know, is there a marketing activity that you're doing? You know, is there a product or service delivery, a consultation that you're doing? What about record keeping? What about maintaining your website? These are all activities that you do. What are some of the key resources that you're going to need? Raw materials, supplies, paper and printer materials. Internet connectivity, things like that are things that you need to deliver the value. Who's going to help you? You know, I mentioned those 4 or 5 key people you need to have in your life, but who else are you going to be partnering with? Like your suppliers, like your web developers, and so on. So these are the things that you do outside the business that enable you to deliver on the value that you're talking about. Your cost structure, right? So we're all in business to make money because right now we're not talking about a not-for-profit environment. So what's it going to cost you to start your business, and what's it going to cost you to maintain the business? And then how much are you going to make, right? How many customers are you going to have? What's your pricing structure? How often are customers going to buy from you? What are they going to buy from you? So this is the green section where we talk about capturing the value from your business. And the difference between box number 9 and box number 8 is what we call profitability or net income, because you don't want to have a net loss, right? And so that's where we're going to focus on the financials of the business. The benefit of using a tool like this is that it creates a visual representation of what you're going to do in your business on a day-to-day basis, on an operating basis. If you do it up front, before you open your doors, it can help you surface some of the gaps in your, in your knowledge or gaps in your strategy, and it can save you from having to recover from errors that you might encounter down the road. Putting your time and effort into a tool like this also can apply to the future business plan. So if you're down the road going to apply for funding, you've done a lot of research up front that you can put into your more comprehensive business plan that will help the lending institution, the loan officer, understand that you really know what you're doing, that you understand your business really well, because they're putting their funds at risk by investing in you. And they want to know that they're going to get their money back or return on their investment. So putting your time and effort into this is really a valuable exercise. And again, I encourage every one of my new clients to sit down and do this. And it takes work. Work is truly a four-letter word. But by the end of the day, if you've completed this business model canvas in a way that is meaningful to you, there's a good probability you're going to have some long-term success. That said, I refer to this as a living document. I encourage my clients to review this at least once a year because, as we mentioned earlier, markets change, economics change, technology changes, competition changes, and you may have to pivot. These days, I have a number of clients that are, in fact, pivoting from, for example, a retail storefront environment to an online environment. We talked the other day to someone who's in the cleaning business, and they've had to pivot to a model that applies to, providing PPE for their employees, disinfectant services and things like that. So I encourage you to do it, get it to a point where it's stable, and then continue to review it ongoing. Again, we have a number of folks in SCORE that are expert in working with clients to develop these models. Please spend the time, if you're thinking about doing a business, to invest your time and energy in this model. So, just to kind of put a little face on all of this, let's talk about McDonald's. And we're talking here about not the franchise operation on the corner, but more the headquarters model. So what is their value proposition? In this case, it's fairly simple, right? A quick and inexpensive meal delivered to their clients, their customers. And as you can see here, there's 3 potential customer segments, and messaging and product and service can be differentiated, right? So families, I'm sure you've been to any number of McDonald's where they have a playland. So in addition to the food and the services, they have a playland. Public, and the general public and workers, right? So what's the message there? It's fast. You go through the drive up. You don't have to spend time. You go in, you drive through, you get your order and you go out. Senior folks, folks are on a fixed budget. So the fact that the foods are reasonably priced encourages those on a fixed income to take advantage of their product and services. Moving to the other side of the chart, what are the key resources? Well, of course, there's the employees and the franchisees that deliver the products to the customers, right? And it's a face-to-face service delivery environment. That's the relationship that McDonald's establishes with their customers. The key activities that headquarters provides are the marketing and advertising. I'm sure we've seen all enough of that. But they also provide some staffing and training in the back office to help the franchisees manage and operate their business and train their employees. Some of the strategic partners that McDonald's headquarters has, specifically is the franchisees themselves. The owners of the local McDonald's are the strategic partners, but also the vendors, right? The folks that provide the soda services, the meats, the bread, the bakers, that the franchisees have to acquire through McDonald's. When we talk about the capturing of value from a corporate perspective, some of the costs that McDonald's headquarters incurs are the staffing, perhaps providing some startup and or maintenance to the locations, the acquisition of the supplies that they provide to the franchisees, their marketing and their advertising expenses. And of course, what are the revenues that McDonald's sees? Royalties and store sales, a percentage of store sales from the franchisees. So that kind of gives you a sense of the simplicity of what it looks like But when you do it the first time, it takes quite a bit of discipline and research to understand what's going on in the business. So it's probably a good point to pause and to see if there are any questions here. I guess we're good.
Yep, we are.
Okay. All right. Just for point of reference, if any of you are interested in working in a nonprofit organization, there is a mission model canvas. Now, let me just clarify. Every mission actually has two missions. One is the mission that serves the beneficiaries. So FoodLink, for example, services the community with food services. And so the people who come to FoodLink for food and supplies are the beneficiaries. The other mission is the business model itself, because in order for FoodLink or any other mission to survive, it needs to have an operating business model. Just like any other business, it can't be operating in the red. It needs to have a zero or a positive income. And so there's a business model and there's a mission model. Interesting though, in the mission model, there's really two kinds of customers. There's the beneficiaries that I mentioned, but in the case of a museum, for example, there are the donors, and the value propositions to the beneficiaries are different than the value propositions to the donors. All right. So what does a donor get out of participating and making a contribution? Well, you get recognition, you get the feel-good aspect of things. Whereas the beneficiary truly gets the benefit of the mission. So enough said about that. Again, if you're interested in working in a nonprofit, SCORE does have expertise in nonprofit entities, and we're happy to provide you with any guidance that you might need in that context. Okay, I guess this becomes the fun part. I happen to like the financials and the funding conversations. But as I mentioned earlier, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. So we're going to kind of give you a context around what that means here. So any business needs to find itself in the green, right? And in order to have longevity. What we're looking here is a benchmark of a net income statement or P&L statement from a business, a general business in the area of personal and laundry services. And I've taken this from an organization called BizStats. It's a free service that you can go online and you can pull a net income statement, for example, from a variety of different industries and business types. So if you notice here, we have a list of expenses and then we have a list of percentages, and all of those percentages are related to the sales at the top. So for this particular benchmark, we see that there's a net profit of roughly 30% on the sales of 100%. Right? So what that means is roughly for every dollar that's come in, the net profit is roughly 33 cents. So what does that mean? How do we take advantage of that information? Well, if you're hoping to have a net income of $50,000, for example, in this particular business, and we know that our net profit is going to be roughly 33%, then we can figure that in order to achieve that, we need to have annual sales of about $150,000. Now, having said that, we know we can now say, okay, so the sales top line where it says 100% now is reflected by $150,000 in sales. And then we can look, for example, at what our expenses might be. So let's say advertising, which you see is 1.25% of sales. So that would suggest that your advertising budget in this benchmark would be somewhere around $1,900. So it gives you a data point against which you can measure your own operating expectations and expenses. Many of the libraries around will offer, and I'm sure that if you went again down to the central library, you can find any number of databases that offer insights like this into your specific business area. The folks down there at the libraries are just really good and really helpful, can help you do the research to come up with some of these kinds of numbers to help you do what you need to do. All of that said, when you're starting a business, you're not going to be in the green on day one or day 365 necessarily. So you need to figure out what it's going to cost to sustain your lifestyle for the next 12 to 18 months, which is generally the average time a new business takes to make a profit. So how do we do that? And we do that by kind of thinking about another projection model that I talk about. So we want to start in the next projection by looking at what's it going to cost to get our business off the ground. If you remember the booklet I referenced early on, the simple steps, this is a picture of the page that's in there that talks about starting your business. And so you can see that it organizes the information into general major categories. And then, starting a business, you can start to fill in the numbers in each of these. Now, not every business is going to have a real estate building or something they're going to buy. Not every business is going to have equipments and fixtures, but you're going to have some startup costs. And so these are important to pay attention to. So leasehold improvements, a beginning inventory, equipment, the development of a website. We talked about the professionals in your life that you're going to need to have. You're going to have some startup marketing to build some recognition so people show up the day you open your door. And you're going to need to have some excess working capital to cover any potential negative cash flows in those first 12 to 18 months. So you're going to do all of that. And if you look at the bottom, towards the bottom here, you see something that says reserve for contingencies. And I refer to that as you don't know what you don't know. And maybe you do know what you don't know, but at the end of the day, my recommendation is add something like 30% to the numbers that you're going to come up with to cover those unexpected contingencies that are going to pop up. And I can almost guarantee you there's going to be some of that. So we have an idea of what our sales are going to need to be to meet our expectations for income down the road. And we have an idea of what it's going to take to start our business. The next step I often work with customers to take is to begin to guesstimate a cash flow projection. You may hear the word pro forma, and basically what that means is projections, projecting certain financials and financial statements. This is just one of those financial statements that we like customers to begin to think about. So it's a cash flow statement. It shows across the top by month, and then it shows down the side, first of all, where income and sales are coming from, cash is coming from. As you see here in the month of March, there's a $3,000 sale that comes in. But then there's what we call use of cash or expenses. And in this case, there's roughly $34,000 of expenses. But at the start, our owner chose to put $100,000 into this business, anticipating that it's going to need some food, some feeding to get it off the ground. So after the incremental sales of $3,000 and the expenses of $34,000, there's been a net operating cash of $69,000. So that $69,000 now appears in the next month as an operating beginning cash flow, and the same process continues, right? Sales and expenses, sales and expenses. Interesting to note that in August, this particular owner said, I need some cash. Well, why might that owner need some cash? Well, perhaps there was an inventory need that needed to be taken care of. Perhaps there was a maintenance or a repair issue that needed to be accommodated. Perhaps there was some other kind of operating expense that needed to be accounted for. Nonetheless, that our business here had to go to the bank and ask for $10,000. Now, there's lots of ways to accommodate that, and I won't go into that here, but they did have to ask for that. The good news is that at the end of this particular period, March through September, our business is showing a positive net operating cash flow. That's a good thing, right? If that were a negative, we'd probably be talking to the bank a little bit more, or any of the other funding sources that we're going to talk about in a moment. So let me pause here for a second and see if there are any questions that we need to address, comments.
Yes, so we do have one question. They asked, what is a good first step for people to take when they have just a business idea?
I would suggest, again, talking with, so doing some basic research, right, is probably the approach. You know, if it's a good business idea and you're concerned about someone else copying it, you want to be careful about what you do. But talk to friends, talk to family. You know, I have a client who's interested in doing, for example, a dog park. Well, she went out to a dog park and talk to people about what they do, what they like, what they see, what's missing, what they'd like to have. So do some good basic research. Again, I go back to that business model canvas and focus on those first two blocks. If you've got a business idea, the question becomes one of what problem you're solving, what need or want are you addressing, and for whom are you addressing it? And so, you know, to think through those and be able to clearly articulate those concepts will give you some sense of whether there's validity in the business. And then you can take those thoughts and go to a target market and ask questions. So if you're thinking of a food service business, perhaps, you know, I'm thinking of an ethnic food business. You might go to something that's in existence today, understand what people are buying, what they like, what they don't like, and see how your business is going to differentiate. And that's a key concept, right? The idea of doing what you do differently. We call it a unique selling proposition. You know, how is your idea so unique, so different from someone else's? And so by understanding the value proposition in the customer segments, you can begin to get to that kind of an understanding. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it does. Also, somebody else asked, could somebody contact SCORE and speak to a mentor to just use them as a sounding board for their ideas and direction?
Absolutely. You know, there's no obligation, there's no strict regiment to working with SCORE. So going to the previous question, if there is a business idea, you can certainly talk to a SCORE mentor about that idea. Everything we do is confidential. You know, we're bound by a code of ethics. And so, you know, what you say to your SCORE mentor, just like your doctor or your lawyer, stays with your SCORE mentor. So absolutely, and that's probably a great way to start as well, because the SCORE mentor will likely have worked with other businesses not unlike yours and can bring to bear their experiences on that. So that's a great way to start as well. Yes, good question.
Okay, and one more question. The business model canvas looks interesting, but can a SCORE mentor help me fill it out? Like, can we do it online, for example?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I've worked with clients that don't necessarily use it in that format. You know, you can do it in a Word document, you can do it in a PowerPoint, you can do it in a lot of different ways. But yes, what the SCORE mentor will do for you is to ask questions for each of those boxes. And you may or may not have the answers. So what we often do is work with the client. We give homework assignments. I often give homework assignments. So let's say that we're walking through the value proposition box, and there's a series of questions, by the way, that we can ask in that. And if you don't have an answer to a question, the SCORE mentor will say, go do your research. Here's where you can research. Here's the kinds of information you might need. We don't do any work, to be honest with you. We help you do the work. And again, the benefit there is that by doing that work, putting that effort in, you're going to learn a lot more than if we actually just did the work for you. So I don't mean to be trite about it, but that's the benefit of doing the work. So yes, absolutely, we can work through box by box. Working with a SCORE mentor is a process, and working through a business model canvas is a specific process, and we're happy to do that.
And one more about the business model canvas. Can you use that for different aspects of your business, for competition research, for example, or a product or service?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mentioned this unique selling point, unique selling proposition. By understanding your value proposition and your customer segments, you can now go off and do your competitive research. Again, go into the libraries and look at the different data that are available to you. If you know your customer segment, for example, is going to be seniors in a certain zip code area, you can now take that information and go to the library and find a count of how many folks there are between 65 and 85 on a fixed income in the zip code 14603 or whatever it might be. You can also do some research to find out who else is providing the same product or services in a given geographic area as well. Again, there are databases, and again, I refer you to the library here. They can help you figure out how to do that research. So yes, you can identify your competitors. The best way to approach all of that is to drill down as deeply as possible into your customer segments. So, I mentioned if you're serving an elderly population, what's the age range? What's the income? What's the geography? The deeper you can unravel the onion, I say, the more targeted can be your research and the more effective can be your long-term marketing strategies.
Okay, and I think that's, let me just double check. Yep, that's it for now.
Okay, great questions, guys. Please continue to ask. And yeah, all right, let me move on. So we talked about funding and where might you get money to start up your business. So here's a list of many of the more common approaches that are available, and we've organized them a little bit by a degree of difficulty. So how is it, how easy is it to acquire funding through these resources? So, starting with you and yourself, you can dig into your savings and your other assets. I often talk with clients who will refinance a house, for example, or lean on their credit cards to get things started. Couple of the key things to consider, I won't hit every one of them, but if you're going to dig into your savings and your assets, how much can you afford to lose? If you're in your 20s or 30s, you might be a little bit more comfortable with a higher degree of risk, whereas if you're in your 50s and 60s and you want to retire, digging into your retirement plan might be something you're concerned about. So risk and willingness to lose are things you must consider as well. I think the last bullet point is telling as well, because if you're not willing to put some of your own skin in the game, why would someone else? So a couple of thoughts there. Another comment I make with clients, particularly my younger ones, is to begin with the end in mind. So, while you're willing to take some risk at this stage of the game, be prepared at somewhere down the road to begin your retirement planning, because you're not always going to be doing this for the rest of your life. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but at some point, most of us would like to kind of kick back. So I tell them to begin with the end in mind and always begin to think about a retirement plan in the process. So kind of a peripheral thought, but it's something I offer. Okay, so fairly easy to dip into your savings if you understand the implications. Friends and family, somewhat moderate in terms of difficulty. Again, things are at risk, and should things fall apart, are you ready to deal with the mental anxiety of having lost a friend or family's money? Same risks apply to them. If you do that, we always encourage you to create a formal loan agreement with the payment and terms. This way, there is no misunderstandings down the road. Everybody is comfortable with the obligations and the expectations that are set forth in the transaction. You can certainly always reach out to a bank. You will need to have a full-blown business plan in most instances. But again, if you have a good relationship with a banker, they're going to be more prone to sit and listen, maybe give you some guidance as well in the formation of that business plan, so that they can represent it internally to the bank that you are a good risk. The Small Business Administration is available to help out, and they have some seminars, and they also have a number of different programs that are available to small businesses. And basically what they do is help to mitigate the risk to the bank by giving some degree of guarantee of repayment. So that's often a good option as well. Most businesses won't get into the next column, venture capital, angel investments. It's a sticky wicket. It requires a great deal of detail analysis, often a great deal of time and effort. You're going to be talking with a lot of different people. The expectations are going to be very high in terms of they don't want to just get their money back, but they want to see a return on that investment. And typically that's fairly significant, upwards of 10, 15, 20%, if not 10 times their investment. And if you watch Shark Tank, you'll hear them talk about equity, right? So in exchange for investing in a business, you may need to give up a certain degree of your business ownership to the investor. One of the more common and more recent transactions and opportunities for funding is called crowdfunding. You may hear the words Kickstarter or Indiegogo. These are ways in which the general public can invest in your business as well. There's a program, if you're studying a business in the city of Rochester, called Kiva, which opens up funding by the general public for a new business opportunity that's going to be existing within the city guidelines. So Kiva is something that you can also ask your SCORE mentor or your small business administration contact about as well. So a number of options here to consider as you're beginning to think about getting your business up and off the ground. I'll pause here for a second, see if there's any questions. Marketing your business. All right, so let's talk about marketing. My suspicion is that most entrepreneurs are really good at what they do in their business, but marketing is not necessarily an area of expertise. So kind of let's touch on that a little bit, and hopefully we can help you out a little here. So always a big question, what is marketing? What is marketing all about? Generally speaking, it's the activities that you do in terms of changing behavior by changing beliefs. Kind of esoteric, but that's essentially what we're trying to get people to do. We want them to do something that's different from what they do today, and we want them to do that, and the way we get them to do that is by giving them some insight, some information, some recommendation to change the way they're currently thinking about what it is that they do. So whether it's buying a new product or going to a different a retail shop or whatever it might be, we're changing behavior by changing beliefs. So here we go again, right? The question is, whose behavior are you trying to change, right? Understand your customers, understand your markets, understand as much as you can about what is going on in their minds. What are their problems? What are their wants? What are their needs, right? And then how are we going to change their behavior? Are we going to give them some new information? Are we going to offer them a better product or a better service or a faster way of doing whatever they do? If you remember what I said earlier in today's conversation, what can you do to help them do what they do better, cheaper, or faster? And the way in which we're going to do this is by developing a marketing plan, right? So we have targeted customer segments. We know what their challenges are and what their issues are. And our goal now is to get them to do something that they haven't been doing in the past. And this is done by creating a marketing plan. Bottom line, in order to increase our sales at the top line, which we talked about before in our cash flow statement, there's two things we can do. We can get more customers or we can get more money from those customers. Those are the two things that we can do. So, customers can buy more, they can buy more often, they can buy different, or they can buy bigger or whatnot. But it's more customers or more spend per customer. And so we do this through creating the marketing plan. This is just an example of some of the typical marketing things that can be done these days in a digital world, a non-digital world as well. But there's many, many more different kinds of things that you can do. It's important to focus on the last column to the right, what we call a conversion rate. So you're going to be spending money or time in your marketing activities, but it isn't going to be a significant return on that investment. I mean, if you look at these typical conversion rates for these typical kinds of activities, you'll see that they're generally below 5%. So if I look at, a blog post, to convert that particular contact, which may be an email contact or someone in your membership group, where they post something, you post something on your website, 0.5 to 3%, right? So if you have 100 people who read it, maybe 3 people are going to convert to do something you want them to do. If you mail a direct postcard to 1,000 people, 1% return on that is good, right? So these are the things you need to think about. When I talk about a marketing plan, I often sit down with my clients and I have them create a matrix where there is a month by month across the top, so January, February, March, and then the list down the down the left of all of the marketing activities that they might perform. And so, in any given month, you might do a blog post, 0 cost to doing that. You might post some Facebook ads. So say $3 for a month's worth of ads, maybe 5-10 times. So you put that in the cell, right? At the end of the day, what you have is a marketing plan by month, by activity, with an estimated cost. And you can also apply that conversion rate to whatever database you have of customer names to determine what the potential sales return might want to be. So you get 2 pieces of information out of that: your expected spend on a monthly basis and your expected sales return on a monthly basis. So I encourage folks to do that. You can take both of those numbers, your sales return and your expenses, and plop that into the cash flow on a monthly basis to see how that affects your overall cash flow. So all of these pieces tie together in the process. And again, there's a discipline to doing this. And if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. So I'll just keep repeating that as needed, as nauseum. So we are now in the absolute home stretch. And so to kind of summarize, and then we'll open up for Q&A, absolutely essential to do some serious soul searching. We talked about personal attributes and we talked about business skills. Check those boxes, ask those questions, dig into yourself, have a conversation with your significant other about the expectations. We talk about the myths and the realities. Weigh all of those factors and understand the implications of getting into your own business. Look at all the different options before you jump in. And I tell people to begin with the end in mind. You don't want to jump in. You don't want to jump into the deep end of the pool if you can't see the bottom, or if you don't know how to swim. So you want to look at all of the options, and we talked about several of those. Have a good group of people behind you. One of the other memes that I tend to say is, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time, but you need help. And so in this case, we talked about the legal and the accounting and the insurance and the banking, and of course the SCORE mentor to help out. It may sound trite, but really failing to plan is simply planning to fail. Without a roadmap, without a cash flow projection of what your business might look like, without a sales and marketing plan, a customer acquisition strategy, you're just going to be tripping over your own feet. You may be repeating failure after failure. What's that old saying? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, if you have a plan, you can go back and you can iterate that plan, and you can see where you've succeeded, you can see where you've failed, repeat the successes. If you continue to manage your knowledge of the market, your knowledge of the competition, you'll continue to do better, to find ways to improve your business and address more and more of your customers' needs and wants. I can't stress this enough, right? Do your financials thoroughly and conservatively. You're going to want to do those pro formas. We talked about a startup list, understanding what your startup costs are going to be. We talked about a cash flow analysis. We also want to look at profit and loss statements and balance sheet statements. So we want to have all of that information thoroughly understood. So do your research, do your analysis, get the help that you need. And I'll close the conversation by saying this. When I work with a new client, I tell them that there's 3 prospective outcomes from working with SCORE. They're going to make some decisions, but there's 3 prospective outcomes that are possible, right? One is that they're going to realize that dream and they're going to have a long and healthy, successful business. The other is that they're going to do their analysis and their research and get the help and their introspection. And they're going to determine that this is a great hobby, but I better keep my day job if I want to keep paying the mortgage and the bills. And the last outcome is, we've done our research, we've done our analysis, we've done our introspection. And at the end of all of that, this is just not right for me. I'm not prepared to do that. I'll be much happier working for someone, perhaps doing the same kind of work that my business would have allowed me to do. But I'm going to get benefits. I'm going to get health care. I'm going to get vacation time. It's going to be a 9 to 5, so to speak, kind of job. So, those are the 3 prospective outcomes that, I talk with my clients about. And it's their decision, right? Our goal as mentors is to help you gather the information, understand the implications of what you found out, and help you make that decision. Because at the end of the day, it is your decision. So that said, I'm done chatting. Please do sign up for free mentoring. Personally, I am taking on new clients. So, reach out to SCORE and ask for me or search by the kinds of skill set that you need. That capacity is out there on the SCORE website as well. Sign up for the next workshop, but start your research. And you will be receiving a survey for today's webinar. So if you would be so kind, let us know how we did and where we might improve from today. So Tamara, I will stop talking and see if we have any more questions.
Okay, yeah, we do have a couple of questions. One of them is, when is a good time to start marketing my business?
Yesterday.
That's what I say.
Right? Yesterday. Start beginning by, for example, creating a blog. Start by creating a Facebook page. You can foreshadow your business. You can preset the expectation of when your store is going to open. In today's climate, we've had a number of businesses that have had to shut down. They are essentially going to be in the startup phase again. Continue to engage with your clients. If you're currently working in a service business and say, for example, you're doing hairstyling or something to that effect, and you're working with clients, and it's okay to talk with them about your future plans. Begin to let people know what you're thinking about your business. So marketing, again, it's a timing issue, but depending upon your business and what it is, you can start early before you open the door so that people, if you will, line up when your doors are open.
Okay, that's good advice. That's what I say too. I mean, it's never too early to start marketing. Is social media the right way for me to get in front of my clients?
I don't know, because I don't know your business. Again, a lot of it depends. So if we go back to the business model canvas, I'll be specific. Who are your clients? Where do they find you? How do you find them? And what relationships do you want to establish with those clients? So by answering those questions, you'll begin to understand the answer to your question.
Awesome, thank you. And what do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of partnerships? Does this share the risk or does it complicate it?
So the answer to that is yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Partnerships vary. There's, for example, there's husband and wife partnerships, and then there are, where husband and wife are in the business together. And then there are partnerships, where it's strictly a business relationship. When you're thinking about a partnership, I think one of the most critical aspects of that is how well do you get along? How do the personalities meld? How will you deal with conflict in that? How will you deal with sharing of revenues? Is it going to be a 50-50? Is one person more of a partner than the other? So again, you want to have a partner contract in place to stipulate, who's the bigger owner versus the other? Who's the president? Who's the vice president? Those sorts of things. So start with understanding the personalities. Be sure that you have ways of communicating, right? Because that's probably the number one thing that would kill a partnership in my point of view. Make sure you can communicate effectively in the good times and the not so good times. And then understand the financial aspects of how that partnership is organized.
Okay, thank you. I think that about does it for our questions at the moment. Do you have any parting thoughts, Scott?
I think I'm tapped out. Generally speaking, I've covered a broad range of things, and without being overly repetitive, please reach out to SCORE and let us help you, with your business, whether you're starting or you're running or trying to grow it. We're here for you.
Oh, and there is one last minute question came in. Is a lawyer recommended when you're starting a partnership?
So to my comment earlier, you want to have a contract agreement between the partners. So the answer to that then becomes yes, you would want to have a lawyer draw up the contract. Typically, I shouldn't say typically, I think one lawyer can suffice depending upon the relationship. You may each want your own lawyers, but there's an expense issue there as well. But yes, I recommend having a contract, and so by default, I think you need to have an attorney. One of the things we suggest clients avoid are the online legal services. I know some people have been setting up those businesses, but contracts can be tricky, and the online services the contracts are generalized, so it helps to have an attorney, a real live attorney, in my opinion, rather than using the online generalized resources.
And that is true. Okay, now I think the questions are done. Nobody's typing or anything. So we can close it out by, first of all, I'd like to thank our interpreters, Byron Beam and Rachel Green. Thank you. It's always a pleasure for you guys to help us out. We're very grateful. Also, for those who are interested, our website, again, greaterrochester.score.org. And we thank you very much for participating. If you need a mentor, please reach out to us and we will be happy to help you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tamara. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you, Scott.